Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 9 of the Identity Love podcast. I'm Tracy Konane. I am a life coach and identity specialist for folks who have lost themselves in relationships and want to not only be themselves, but love and enjoy being their true self. And I promise you that once you start to actually learn and understand what it is to be yourself, you are going to feel cool and good and inspired and excited to be who you really are. It's just that over the years, your true self has been covered up by all these opinions and pressures and what everybody thinks. And we're trying so hard to be this really nice person and someone who is a hard worker and who is being good for everybody. And while that's a really, really good thing to aim for, it covers up our true self if we do it to an extent that is too much. And so my job here is to help us to uncover all these years and years of the opinions and trying to be good for somebody else and how that has turned us into somebody that we don't like being and we don't feel good being. And to balance it out, so it's not that you become this selfish person who only thinks about themselves. You're still going to be a nice person because that's who you really are at your core. But you're also going to incorporate and be this version of yourself that is actually true to you. And it feels cool and good to you because it is your own unique self that you're being. And so that's what I help you do. So the thing is that I've been on my own journey for a long time as far as becoming who I really am. And even though there's so much information and inspiration and quotes and blog posts and everything, books about how to be yourself, and they're just like, be you, there's nobody else like you, just believe in yourself, trust yourself, be true to yourself. They keep saying all these things, but then nobody ever addresses, from my experience, the fact that our entire lives in this modern society is spent having this being told to us, and then at the same time it being taught out of us by schools, parenting, societal expectations, pressures, media, advertising, everything. And there's not one thing that helps guide us to figure out who we truly are and how to actually follow all those aphorisms, all those quotes about being yourself. Nobody tells us how to do it. And so for a long time, I was very confused about how to do this. And I thought, okay, I just have to find out who my true self really is. And I assumed that your true self is kind of like something very concrete. I just have this teeth whitening box here. And so I thought, okay, my true self is like this box. This is what it is. It's just this thing, and it is what it is. So this thing is purple. It has some pink iridescent dots on it. It has a smiley face in the corner, and it has some white text, and it's a rectangle, and it's about 5 inches by 3 inches, and it has a barcode on. So I thought that I had to do the same thing to figure out who I really am. I thought that I had to figure out the exact stuff that I liked. Who was I? What was my actual personality? What did I actually like? What were my real tastes? What did I really feel like? What was my behavior? What are my moods? What kind of fashion do I like? Who am I? Who am I really? I wanted to figure out this list of actual traits. So then I'll say, okay, that's who I am. And I'm going to make sure that I stay within this. So I know for sure that anything outside of that isn't the real me. And so I'll always know who the real me is. And so I was just searching for what was real. What was the truth about this? And I was like, okay, well, sometimes I'm kind of extroverted in certain situations. In a previous podcast, I told you about how my mom always said, "You're being so loud, stop being so loud." And I was like, so maybe that means I'm sort of extroverted. And I do like to talk a lot when I'm talking about something that I find very interesting, when it's one-on-one with somebody that I trust and like talking with. But then in other situations, I'm kind of quiet and not interested in making lots of conversation. I don't like small talk. But then I was a bartender once, and I like to make small talk with people real quickly as I'm pouring drinks. So maybe that means I'm extroverted, but then that can't be right because I really like spending time by myself. So I was constantly trying to figure out, what am I? What is the exact thing? What is my exact traits? And I see a lot of people doing this as well, with taking quizzes about your personality or your astrology or all these different things, because I think it gives us a sense of self where it lists out these exact things where we're like, oh yeah, so I'm that. Or, oh, that makes sense. It tells me I'm this, so I must be this. It gives us these concrete things that we can follow. So then we feel like we have these parameters, this formula that we can follow, that then we know, okay, my true self is this, and that's it. And then you don't think about it anymore. And so I thought that I had to figure out all these different things. Same with my fashion. So at first, with my fashion, I thought that I am a creative person. So creative people tend to wear, and this was just in my own mind, they tend to wear colorful things. They are expressive. They like to have creative, interesting looking jewelry and bags and shirts, and they just like things that are artistic and different. And so I thought I should like that. But then when I looked at what I actually felt comfortable and good wearing, it was a lot of kind of what I'm wearing right now. It's just like a black basics, pants, basic shirt, and then I liked accessories. So I was like, well, what is this then? Why am I wearing all this basic minimal stuff when because I love seeing color and I love seeing weird fashion on other people. I like that. So I thought that that's what I liked. And so I was like, well, which one is it? And sometimes I do feel very good dressing kind of extra and having, of course, the colored hair, piercings, boots, and cool purses. I do like pops of color a lot. But then on so many days, I feel like just really flying under the radar and just being very minimalist. So I was confused there as well. And then it was, of course, who am I when I'm going to my relative's funeral versus who am I when I'm partying with my friends on the weekend? Those are two completely different people. Am I more of the funeral person or am I more of the party person? Who is my real self? So I had all these questions and I thought that I needed to find all these answers. And then sometimes I felt like I was getting close to who my real self was. I'm like, okay, this feels more like me. I feel like I'm being myself. And then something would happen and then the seasons would change and things in my life would change. And I'd be like, wait a minute, I feel like dressing more like this now, or it feels like my mood has shifted a little bit more. I was very soft and loving last month, but this month I'm feeling kind of hardcore. I'm feeling like I kind of want to just be a little more high energy and aggressive. And so I'm not sure if you have experienced this, but I felt like I was my true self in one situation. And then, wait, this situation also feels true to me, but it's so different from this other true self. And I was confused because I thought that I had to lay down this exact version of myself that I'm like, okay, this is my true self. This is what it looks like. So something that happened recently, if you've been following my Instagram stories, is that you've seen that I traveled home to Oahu, Hawaii, which is where I was born and raised. And I lived there until I was age 27. And then I moved to California and I've been living here for over a decade now. But I traveled back home and I stayed there for 2 weeks to see my family, my parents and my sister. And I brought my boyfriend with me and it was amazing. I am endlessly grateful and thankful for having had the luckiness to just live, to be born and raised in such an amazing paradise of a place, and to be able to go back there and see my family. And it was great. But at the same time, it was a roller coaster of emotions and identity crises in a way, because I had lived in LA for over a decade, and this is where I actually found myself. I felt like I needed to move away from everything I've known and to come to a place that felt more like a city that was full of creative, weird people, and in a place that was just had a lot more going on. And everyone always says, why did you move from Hawaii? Why did you move from paradise? And the truth was, it's not that I hated it there. It's just that it got really small for me. And I felt like my identity yearned for something different. And so when I moved here, it felt like, okay, this feels exciting, expansive. It feels more like me, like I can be more of myself. And this was around the time when I was finally going on my self-love journey, detoxing from all the years of people pleasing. And I thought I was going to be a librarian. I realized I did not actually want to do that. And so I was in this whole mode of finding myself. And so I found myself here, and myself here. That's when I had the colored hair. That's when I dressed. I found my fashion. It's a little bit more edgy. I wear more like leather jackets here, expressive stuff. I feel like I can fully express myself without feeling like anything is restricting me. And I feel more at home here, as myself, even though Hawaii as an environment feels more familiar and like my upbringing and like where I'm from. So I feel like I have two homes right now, which is kind of a weird, interesting thing. But it's not so much about the environment than it is about what it made me feel like. Because once I got home to Hawaii, the energy there is so different. It is so much more chill and laid back, and just being back and seeing my parents and the places that I grew up, and everything being kind of just the same as when I grew up. And same friends, same places, same energy. And it made me remind myself of how I felt before I left. And it also made me feel like my LA identity didn't quite fit in to this me that I was on this island where I'm from. And so I felt like I didn't know who my true self was anymore. And upon going home, I hid my nose piercing. I flipped it up into my nose so my parents wouldn't see. And I didn't really feel like I wanted to be very visible. I didn't feel like that go-getter kind of expressive energy as I felt so much here in LA. I really just wanted to relax and chill and be a little bit more low-key. And just go with the flow and not have this, I don't know what else to call it, but this ambitious, constantly like entrepreneur kind of energy that I like feeling here. And so also the swearing, I feel like here I am being my adult self where I swear a lot because I'm passionate about different things. And I feel like that's how I express myself. And when I go home, again, I was just toning my energy down a lot and slowing down and not swearing around my parents and just concentrating on the little simple things, like trying to see, okay, Dad, what are you watching on YouTube? Tell me about this. Okay, Mom, what are you putting in your recipes that you're showing me here? I had to really slow myself down and make an effort to do so because I felt like who I was so easily in LA didn't quite fit in to the environment of being back home. And even though I still kept to the routine that I decided upon ahead of time, because before going home, I was like, I want to stick to my routine. I want to have a list of things that I want to do while I'm there. And so I had these things that I knew were true to myself that I wanted to do because I asked myself these things. But it was just the things around it where I was like, I don't feel like I'm the same person when I'm visiting back home than I am when I'm at my place in LA. And so I had to remind myself, there is no one set true self like I thought before. There is the me that is here in LA with this environment, without my parents around, in this environment where everyone's creative and doing all kinds of stuff. And there's the me who was back home in my home environment when I grew up, with all the old memories and all the laid back attitudes, and with my family there and this beach culture. And that's still me, even though it's a different version of me. My true self, our true selves, are multifaceted and complex and fluctuating and ever-changing. And this is because we are human beings who are interesting, intelligent, and wired to adapt. We are not just one set way that is set in stone. And so who you are going to be in one situation, who you want to be in one situation, right? Because if you've listened to the previous podcasts, you know that your true self is the person that you yourself decide that you want to be in your life, in your situation, in your relationship, because it's coming from your own desires. So that's your truth. And that is going to change in the situation. Just like I said before, when you go to the funeral, you're not going to want to be the exact same as you are when you're going on vacation with your friends. There's obviously different times and places to be different versions of yourself. And the important thing is to always stay in touch with the truth of who you want to be in each of these separate situations. And so when things start to feel like they're not matching, when you go to a different situation and you feel like you cannot be your quote unquote true self that you are used to being, it doesn't mean that anything is going wrong. It just means that there is a different side of yourself that is being called to the surface in this situation. And we're meant to adapt and change according to the situation, but most importantly, according to our own desires of who we most want to be in that situation. So this is different from people pleasing, from partner pleasing. And I think this is where I myself and where a lot of you get confused because, again, none of this is explained to us. But it seems like when we are adjusting ourselves for different situations, we start to think, oh no, am I adjusting myself because I'm trying to please the people in this situation? Am I adjusting myself? Am I hiding my piercing because I'm trying to please my parents and I'm not showing up as my real self? Am I trying to be more laid back and toned down because I'm trying to people please everyone around me? Am I people pleasing by changing who I feel like I want to be in each situation? And so the thing about this is, yes, as good-hearted humans, we're always going to want to care in some shape or form about how other people feel about us. And we're going to want to have connections and feel like we are being aware and respectful of our environments. This is part of being a good, caring person. But where is it actually coming from? What is the energy behind it? And this is what I had to ask myself as I was putting my nose piercing in my nose and hiding it. I was like, am I doing this because I'm trying to hide my true self from my parents? And am I going to be resentful? Do I feel like, oh, because of them, I can't do this? Or am I doing it because I truly inside would prefer to not have it showing because that's who I want to show up as for my parents? It's that I personally feel like I'm being a little more respectful in my own way towards them by just not having it on my face. And there is no right or wrong answer to this. In the future, I might challenge myself to not care. And yes, part of me did want to hide it because I didn't want to go through the whole conversation if they commented on it or if they might see me as less respectable or whatever because I had it on my face. But I also felt like I wouldn't resent them for me having to hide it. I wouldn't think that they are controlling me. It was more that I was making this decision for myself, and it wasn't that I didn't have a choice. I think that I felt like if I did want to leave it out, I would be able to be fine and handle that. I just wanted to save myself the time and energy of dealing with it in the first place. And so there was no resentment. It was just my preference of who I truly wanted to be in the moment. And I think that's what the main goal is to start to realize and recognize the difference between when you're trying to be a certain way to please somebody because you're trying to get them to think and feel a certain way about you in a way that you feel is pandering and you're needy for it, versus when you're doing it because it feels better for you as well, where you feel good being that way just on your own. And I think there's a lot of talk about, oh, are you being genuine? Are you being authentic? Are you just not caring what anyone thinks? But the thing is, you care about what you think. And it's always going to be based a little bit on how we want to present ourselves to someone else, how we want someone else to experience us. And I think that's very different from trying to change how somebody else thinks and feels about us so we feel better about ourselves. So let me just explain this in a different way, because another confusing part about figuring out who your true self is when you feel like you want to be a certain way, but you at the same time don't want to be a certain way. Let me explain. So for example, if I'm going to go and visit a relative that I don't really get along with, and there's kind of some tension and conflict there, if I'm choosing to visit this relative, I might decide to make an effort to smile and be polite and kind and cordial on the surface to this person, while deep inside I might be pissed off and uncomfortable and not approving and not wanting to be there. So am I people-pleasing in that moment when I am hiding, so to speak, my true feelings? This is my question, right? Because a lot of times in life, we're supposed to put on the nice face when deep inside, we don't want to. Our true feelings are the opposite of that, right? So the question isn't what is the exact right answer in every single situation. This is not about finding out the one right answer that fits all, because that's not how it works here. The question is, based on this particular situation, who do I truly want to be? It goes back to the whole coolest self thing. Would my coolest self make an effort to put on the happy face while feeling conflicted and annoyed inside? Would my coolest self do that? Do I want to be somebody who in this particular situation makes an effort to act kinder and nicer and happier than I truly feel inside? And, each situation is different, but if I decide I feel better about myself after making the discomforting effort of being nice and putting on the face, in the face of discomfort, I feel better about myself because I like to feel like I am strong enough to be the better person in that situation. And so it's not so much that I'm trying to be over here pleasing this person that I don't agree with. It's that I'm trying to please myself, where afterwards I'm not preoccupied with, okay, did this person like me? It's more like, did I like myself after I interacted with this person? And so again, it's situational, because in a different situation with a different person, I might decide, you know what, I want to speak up and I want to say something. And no matter what they think about me, I will feel better about what I did in the situation. And so that's also a choice. So there's no one set way that your true self, your coolest self, is supposed to act in every situation. There may be one certain type that you tend to do more of, but I want to remind you that this isn't something that you just decide and then you turn your brain off, right? It's not like you look at your astrological chart and say, okay, I'm always a nice person, so I'm just always going to smile no matter what. We don't want that. We're trying to think for ourselves here. This is the whole thing. You can use things as guidances as to who we are like or who we want to be more of. But when it comes to actually doing this in real life, we have to keep our brains going. We have to stay aware of ourselves and who we want to be. And we've always been doing this. We've always been staying aware of ourselves. It's just that we've been aware in a way that is self-conscious. We're aware in a way where we're worried about what someone else is thinking about us and then behaving in that way. So now you're doing the exact same thing, just for yourself. Instead of going through life adjusting yourself for what someone else is thinking and what they are going to gain, we adjust ourselves and be self-conscious by looking at ourselves, the eyes of our coolest self. We're self-conscious not because of someone else, but because of who we want to be. So it is kind of a way of being self-conscious, but you're being self-conscious within yourself. You're conscious of how you want to be, how you prefer to be in the situation. And how you can tell if you're doing this right is when after the interaction is over, you like the effort you made. You appreciate the effort you made. So in the situation with this relative, I would decide to make an effort and smile and feel like I'm completely not being my true self, so to speak, as far as my emotions are concerned. I feel like I'm not truly expressing my real emotions, but my true self in that moment would prefer me to be the bigger person and keep the emotions to myself because I know that it's not going to help the situation and that I would ultimately prefer to be somebody who doesn't make this a problem, who can control herself, who is non-confronting and not buying into the drama. That's who I want to be for this. And afterwards, when I do that and I feel like, okay, I'm like who I am, that means I truly did it. I listened to my coolest self. Versus if I did that, and then afterwards I was like, oh, why did I let her say those things to me and I didn't say anything back? And I realized that I had gone too far and I let her push me around and I ended up bending over backwards. That's when I realized, okay, that was actually me trying to please her. When you start to notice how you feel, instead of like figuring out what should I do? How do I set the boundaries? Blah, blah, blah. It's more focusing on the feeling because your true self, your coolest self will guide you. And so it really is a practice over time of getting to focus into yourself and seeing how do you feel after you do certain things. This isn't about being perfect. It took me a lot of trial and error to figure this out. I'd say like, okay, I really liked how calm I was able to be in the face of this, but I didn't like that I smiled and agreed with her when she said that one thing. I didn't like that I nodded and agreed. In the future, I'm not going to even say anything. I'm not going to agree with her. I'm just going to keep being calm. So there's always going to be little parts where you liked more and then parts where you can improve upon. And it's just noticing these things. It's not judging yourself for it. It's about realizing, okay, what do I really, truly want to be like? Who am I truly? So the truth of your true self is that there's no single way of being. It changes, it fluctuates, it is an art. And while there are core values and core things about you that will relatively stay the same throughout your life, you are going to change as you grow up more and more, and you're growing up all the way until you die. As you grow up, you're going to be changing, growing. Think about how different you have been since you were a teenager till now. There's a big difference. There's supposed to be a big difference. And there's going to be a big difference between now and 10 years from now and after that. And so it isn't that we nail down the specific thing that you are. You have to understand that you're always flowing. And so back to me trying to figure out, am I extroverted or more introverted? I am both to my own ways. There's some times where I'm going to want to talk a lot about certain things, but it's only in certain situations, with certain people, with certain topics. It really depends on the situation. And so I no longer try to just say, well, I'm 80% introverted, 20% extroverted. I'm just like, you know what? I am what I am in the situation when I know what I want to be. And I no longer put pressure on myself in situations where I don't want to be extroverted. I actually don't feel truly interested in talking to people. I used to judge myself and say, well, if you're really a nice person, if you're really a good people person, if you really made an effort, you would always try to make small talk. You would always try to be this way. And I would put so much pressure on myself and judge myself for that when I'm like, you know what? I do like talking to people in these situations with these certain people. And it's not like it has to be one size fits all. It's not like I always have to be a certain way for everything for me to be being my true self. There's going to be situations in which my true self doesn't want to talk to people. And I have to be okay with that. If my coolest self wouldn't make the effort to go and have small talk for 5 hours at this thing that I have no interest at being at, then I'm not going to do that. But there's going to be situations where my true self feels uncomfortable and shy, but wants to try to make an effort to make small talk because it's a special situation. And I'll understand that and I'll feel that. And the fact that I'm going to have to make an effort for that doesn't make it mean anything less to me. I know that I'm going to have to make an effort. So that's the second thing. So the first thing is your true self is not set in stone. It's always meant to be changing. The second thing is that it is going to take some effort to be your true self. We always tend to think that when you just be yourself, you relax and don't try, and whatever comes and whatever happens, that's the easiest thing, is the thing that you are. But that's not true, because if that was true, then nobody would ever aspire to be anything. We wouldn't have ambition. We'd just be like, well, this is how it is. Our true selves want more than that. So we have to make an effort to be more for our true self. So your truth is based on your desire, on what you yourself prefer and want. And we will have to make ourselves rise to the occasion many times. So back to my trip home, I met my boyfriend while bartending. I lived and worked in bars through my college life. That's how I made my money. That was my whole social life. I felt very comfortable being there. I drank a lot. I partied a lot. And so when I go home and I go into Waikiki, into all the area where there's the bars and the restaurants that are so familiar, that I spent so many years knowing so many people and being in this certain mindset and lifestyle, I feel the pull of doing the same things as I did back then, even though my coolest self now doesn't want to do all that stuff anymore. It's just that back then, back when I was in my 20s, my coolest self back then was partying and being extroverted, because she was trying to make up for all the years of being sheltered and never having people and never being able to express herself. It felt so good to my coolest self back then for me to be more of that party, outgoing thing. But that was then. And now, when I get really close and clear to my new coolest, truest self, she's like, oh, we don't do that. No, you already did that. That's not cool anymore. It's not cool to be hungover. It's not cool to go to bed late. You like mornings, which is weird because I never was a morning person. I always was a night owl. That was me. Ever since I was born, I was always trying to stay up later than my bedtime. My parents had to put a gate across my door to keep me from coming out. So I always had this identity where I'm like, no, I'm a night owl. And then in my 20s, my coolest self was not only the night owl, but she was the party animal night owl, and she could do whatever she wanted, and it felt so good. So now for me to say, wait a minute, my coolest self is telling me that I'm a morning person now? I don't know about that. It felt really weird. It felt like my two coolest selves from different time periods were having this tug of war. But I had to stay aware of my new version of my coolest self. And so what you thought was cool when you're growing up is cues and clues to who you really are, yes, but it changes in the way that it manifests within you. So even though I once admired the coyote ugly girls and people who were kind of out doing things a little rebelliously, that is still something I like, but it doesn't have to translate in the way that it did back then. It doesn't have to be this bartending party life. Now, it translates as, okay, I'm going to go my own new way. I'm going to use that rebellious energy to go and rebel against my old self and be like, you know what, we're doing differently now. We're going to figure out what it's like to do this morning person thing, this cool entrepreneurial thing, this thing where you are creating your own life and you are getting to experience things in a whole new way. And that is what kept me going through all the old memories and going back to the old places where I felt like, oh no, I feel like I want to drink. I feel like I should be partying. It felt so uncomfortable. It felt like I wasn't being cool. It felt like I was going against who I really am. There was a night where my boyfriend and my dad were staying up late drinking and watching TV and bonding, and I went to bed. I said goodnight, I closed the door, and I lay there feeling left out, feeling uncool, feeling all the emotions conflicting with each other. And I had to remind myself that it was because tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up on my own schedule and I'm going to feel good about myself. And I could totally just go out there right now and say, forget it. I'm going to go and hang out with them and be that old person that I have been before when I just stay up late and hang out with them. If they're hanging out, I want to be hanging out. I could have done that, but I know that I would have waken up late the next morning. I would have felt crappy about myself, and I would have felt resentful towards them. When they're not forcing me to do anything, I'm an adult with my own mind and my own will, and I would have thought, oh, they made me stay up late. They made me drink. They weren't making me do anything. And I didn't want to feel that resentment. I instead knew that I would feel better for myself if I kept to my own desires. And so it hurt. It felt uncomfortable. It took a lot of effort to just go to bed and not feel super sad. I did feel sad. And then the next morning I woke up and I was like, oh, thank goodness. And I allowed myself to feel good. I allowed myself to say, wow, this is a big step forward. Look, you got to experience something so much better than resentment and going against what you really wanted. Even though it's hard in the moment, even though it doesn't feel like what you really are in the moment, it takes effort. And look, you know that you did the right thing because now you feel good about who you are. You don't feel stuck. You don't feel resentful. This feels so much better than just going along with what feels easy, thinking that that's what you should be doing. Okay, so to summarize, the truth about your true self is that your true self is many different versions of you. It is going to change and fluctuate over time, depending on situations, depending on who you're with, depending on where you are in your life, it is meant to change. It is not just one set rule and formula of things. Secondly, your true self is who you most want to be. And this often takes effort in order to be this person. It might not feel natural in the moment, but it is because you are making this effort to be this better version of you that you most want to be. One that you will feel proud and aligned and at peace with. And sometimes while doing the thing that it takes to feel that way isn't going to feel good in the moment. But that doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. The proof is in the afterwards, right? So me going to bed, putting the earplugs in, feeling forever alone in that moment when they're out there enjoying their time together without me, I knew it was because I would get to wake up and feel aligned and at peace with who I was, that I made the effort for who I most wanted to be. That's how you know you're doing it right. It's not based on how easy and natural it feels in the moment. 3, your true self takes awareness and focus on how you feel. The difference between pleasing others and being nice because you yourself want to be nice is huge. It's because how differently it feels within you. You get to feel good about yourself afterwards. Notice how you feel afterwards when you're doing it from a place of who you want to be. That's how you know you're doing it. You can be nice to somebody you don't feel like being nice to. And that's not pleasing them if you're doing it because it also pleases you. So it is noticing how you're actually feeling about yourself. How in each moment, because we're so used to tuning into how somebody else feels. So as you're going through the situation that you're in, you practice tuning into how you feel and if it feels like you're being who you want to be. This is a practice. This is something we're not used to, but it is something you learn from trial and error, and you don't judge yourself harshly. You just notice afterwards, okay, I could have done better here. Okay, I didn't go to bed like I said I wanted to. I stayed up and drank with them. And now I feel resentful. I don't feel proud of myself. This is not who I wanted to be. Even though it felt good and fun in the moment, afterwards it felt like I wasn't being true to who I wanted to be. And it feels icky in the moment, but you just say, hey, this is going to remind myself for next time. Sometimes I write down, I'm like, man, I feel so crappy that I went and did that thing. And I'm going to try to remember that this felt so bad after, so that next time I want to feel good. And so it is just about not making it mean that you're awful or that you're failing, and instead making it mean that you can learn from this and use it as a motivation and reminder for yourself. Just say, okay, I tried that before. I tried to do the thing that felt easy in the moment, but it's not what I wanted to do. And yes, it felt bad after. So it helps you to take an effort towards what feels good so you get to feel good. And the more you get to know yourself, this is number 4, the more you get to know yourself, the easier this will get. It is going to feel confusing as you start doing this. This is about feeling out and learning who you are, learning your preferences, learning that there's different sides of yourself and how you feel when you do different things. And finally, number 5, this should feel fun and rewarding. Okay? It should feel like there's so much more to life than what you've been living, that there's so much more options, that you are in control and you get to create the experience you want to create in your life, that you have this, that this is up to you. And yes, like I said, in the moment, it's going to feel like it takes effort. It's going to feel confusing. There's going to be a roller coaster. That's normal. But it should feel so much more fun and rewarding than going along with the pleasing and the resentment and feeling like you have no control over yourself. Okay? It should feel like you are finally getting to live life your way. And when you feel good, when you make the effort and you give yourself the credit, which you should be, give yourself the credit after you do something for yourself. You deserve that. You have to allow yourself to make it feel fun and good for yourself. Okay, so that's what I have for you as far as the truths of being your true self. This upcoming week, I want you to really think about this. I want you to go through your life and start to feel and think about in each situation, who do I want to be? What feels good? What would feel better for me to be? Allow yourself to be multifaceted and ever-changing, and you are an art, okay? This is the art of being yourself. Art is fluctuating, it changes, it has new ideas, it is changing and growing over time. You are not just a math equation. You are something that is changing and growing along with yourself. And this should feel empowering and freeing. All right, everyone. Be true to your true self this week, and I'll talk to you next time in episode 10. All right, everyone. Bye-bye.